For this video, I want to look at Homer Laughlin markings. In the previous videos, I've been showing some markings from dinnerware and toiletware and hotelware and some cableware, and I've just been flipping over a piece just to show the marking, and that's pretty much it. So I thought this would be a good time to take a step back and just look at some of the generic markings that were used on multiple shapes. Now, a lot of the markings you're going to encounter in Homer Laughlin are going to be shape specific, like Fiesta or Serenade, or let's say Wells Art Glazes. What's another one? Coronet. But we're going to focus on these more generic ones that you will find on multiple shapes. So we'll start with the 1870s and look at Laughlin Brothers. So this type of marking would have been used while both Homer and Shakespeare were with the company. Now, Shakespeare Laughlin left in 1877, so if you find something with Laughlin Brothers in it, you know it's going to be from the 1870s. And there are several different Laughlin Brother markings. I only have this one to show you today, this porcelain granite one, with the little crown and scepters and the little cape and coat of arms. So it has a somewhat British look to it. Most potteries did make British-looking marks in this time period because they were wanting to copy British wares. Now, shortly after Shakespeare leaves, we see the premium stone china marking, which is used from about 1878 to 1894. And we see the eagle over lion, so we've got the American dominance over British pottery going on here. And it says premium stone china, Homer Laughlin. And this is a little salad nappy from white granite staples. So there were multiple sizes made. This is the smallest version, I believe. So you will find this mark on early cableware. You'll find it on toiletware like Lenox and Denver and Victor. You will also find it on Victor dinnerware and Shakespeare dinnerware. Now, while that was going on, in 1885 and 1886, we have the horseshoe marking, which we see it here. It's got the crossed swords, the horseshoe, and Laughlin china. If you find this mark, it's probably going to be on a piece of Chelsea, which we looked at that before. That's the translucent ware, where light will pass through it. This is a Chelsea butter pat. It's also used on other fine porcelain. Pretty rare mark. Then from 1894 to 1905, we have the signature marking, or what I call the signature marking. Has the eagle and lion, but we have Laughlin written out below it in a signature style. And this comes from Louis XVI bone dish. You can see the little inside line going on with this. This is treatment number 723. Rather unusual to have a treatment number on a bone dish. But you'll see this marking used on dinnerwares like Louis XVI and Rococo for the first time, toiletware like Nanita and Florentine. And there are variations of this. We see the signature marking with patent applied for on a bridal brush face. We've already seen this marking when looking at bridal. And you can find it on Seneca with the white granite underneath of it. And other shapes as well with the shaping like American Beauty and Colonial. We're going to look at that in a minute. Now, the circle mark was made at the same time as the signature mark, so there's overlap with these. Circle marks will generally have the shape name underneath, like American Beauty in this case. Still has our eagle and lion. We've got the American Beauty embossing going on with this little butter pat. And there's the Golden Gate marking. So this type marking, the circle mark, was used on Golden Gate and American Beauty. Let's see, Colonial, King Charles. And if it doesn't have a name on the bottom of it, then it's probably going to be on a piece of toiletware or some other piece. So those are your circle marks. Again, same time as, or they overlap with your signature marks. Now when you get to 1905, we have the Fleur-De-Lis marking. And this marking replaces the older one. So there's no more eagle and lions after 1905. Because you have this, French influence in pottery. So the HLC is intertwined to form this little Fleur-De-Lis logo. We see Homer Laughlin, and this is the Angelus shape. That's a little mini baker. And shapes that follow look very similar to this. So you have Hudson and Niagara, we see here. This is from about 1910. Now what they did with the older shapes that were still being made, the ones that had either the signature marking or the circle marking, they got rid of the eagle and lions and made the Fleur-De-Lis versions. So in the case of Seneca, where we have the eagle and lion with white granite, that was gotten rid of in favor of the Fleur-De-Lis marking. And this is kind of weak, so I hope you can see it. But we have the Fleur-De-Lis, Homer Laughlin, and Seneca underneath. So any of those shapes that were still around, like American Beauty, Golden Gate, Colonial, King Charles, all of them would have been changed over from these eagle and lions to Fleur-De-Lis. Now in 1912, when Genesee comes around, we start to see date codes. And this one is 1915. So it says 10-5L. The 10 stands for the month, which is going to be October. The 5 stands for 1915, and the L stands for the Laughlin plants that were in East End and East Liverpool. And we still see the shape name underneath in cursive, Genesee. And here's another one from the teens, and the little Empress saucer that's got a 7 in the middle. So that's from 1917. Now before moving on into the 20s, because I mentioned this about how they had to change over the eagle and lions to the Fleur-De-Lis, if 4 colonial back stamps, I think there are 5 in total, but this one has the signature mark with colonial on top. We have 2 versions of the circle mark. The one on the left has the wings pointing down. The one on the right have the wings pointing up, so you never know if the eagle's taking off or landing. And then you've got the Fleur-De-Lis marking, which replaces all of the eagle and lion markings with colonial underneath. There's a 5th marking. It's another one of these circle marks. I couldn't find it for this video. Eventually, when I do a video dedicated to the colonial shape, I'll try to dig that out so we can see all of them. Now in 1920 and 1921, we go from single digits to double digits. So this is a little hotelware, undecorated blank baker. And that's 120L, so that's going to be January 1920, the Laughlin plants over in East End. Now, for some unknown reason, when we get to 1922 and all the way through to 1929, they go back to a single year, just like they did in the teens. So this is from 1923. Now, we know it's 1923 for 2 reasons. First, the month is being represented by a letter instead of a number. And so A would be January, B would be February, and so on. And it also has Made in the USA, and that didn't start until 1922. So if we compare this with the Empress saucer, you see no Made in the USA, and this one does have Made in the USA. So if you've ever noticed when I'm flipping over pieces and I can tell right away if they're like, let's say a 7, I can tell if it's 1917 or 1927. What I'm doing is I'm looking for that Made in the USA, and that tells me right away what decade I'm dealing with. Now 1930, we go back to the double digits, and we see a 30 in the middle, so that's 1930, a little trellis jug. Again, for some unknown reason, for 1931 and for most of 1932, we go back to a single digit. So this is a Century Velum glazed sugar base. We've seen this before when we were looking at Garland. Nice vellum marking, but it has a 1 there. So if you're new to collecting and you're a stickler for the rules, you're going to look at this and say, well, there's no Made in the USA. It's a 1. It must be 1911 or something else. But no, this is 1931. We know that because we know the shape, we know the glaze, we know the decoration. Same thing with this piece, which is Ravenna, which comes from the 1930s. We know this decal, we know the glaze, we know that's 1930s. It's a Frederick Reed shape. But we look at the marking, it says B2N6, I believe is the last digit. It might be a 5, I can't tell. But this is 1932. It's not 1912, it's not 1922, but 1932. Now, towards the end of 1932, and all the way through to 1968, we get 2 digits, and they stay with 2 digits for the whole period. So here's a typical marking. This is a Brittany saucer that was picked up for Piccadilly, and it's marked K42N6, so the 42 means 1942. It's very easy when you've got dates from this time period, because it's just double digits. I don't know if I mentioned this already, but if you want to know what these other things mean, go to the website laurelhollowpark.net, scroll down to the Homer Laughlin section. There's a link on back stamps, and it goes into detail on all the markings we've looked at thus far that have all these date codes. Now, once you get to 1969 all the way through to 1980, you get the explicit marking, which is just the 4 digits that represent the year. In this case, 1974. Still have the Fleur-De-Lis, still have Homer Laughlin, still have Made in the USA, but there's no special codes or ciphers or formulas to consider. It's just flat out 1974. It'd been nice if they'd done that for every year, but we get that from 69 to 1980. If you ever see reissue Harlequin, the dinner plates may have 1980 on them, or 1977 or 78. One unfortunate thing about this marking is that this is done during a time period where many things aren't marked. So it's usually limited to dinner plates or chop plates. It's somewhat unusual to see this Granada 7.5-inch plate have a marking at all. So yeah, again, that time period, 69 and 1980. Now once you get to the 1980s, 81, 82, 83, you're dealing with double digits. And in this case, we have a piece with 1982. So after 1986, as long as they make semi-vitreous wares, you will see this double digit. There's none from the 90s. So that's a look at some of your generic back stamps. If you want to know about Best China, you can go to the website and look at that link I just mentioned. Best China is pretty easy. The leading letter is your year. So A is 1960, B is 1962 or 61. Z is 1985, double A is 1986. So it's all there on the website, laurelhollowpark.net. So we'll be looking more at back stamps in the future, I'm sure, but I just thought this would be a good point in time to just kind of stop and look at these markings and see what they all mean and how they evolve from one year to the next, or one decade or one time frame to the next. So that's it for now.